is a quick video on the details of submitting the quarterly report due to Missouri Main Street every quarter. First of all, we're going to get into what is collected and who submits that information. So, who submits? Who reports? Basically, it's any Missouri Main Street program that is under a contract or an agreement. So that includes our community empowerment grant communities, the St. Louis Main Streets programs, affiliate, associate, and accredited communities. The Economic Vitality is the committee that leads this effort. I like to say that the Economic Vitality Committee is the research arm of the Main Street organization. So this information helps them understand where the program is, where the downtown district is, as far as economics, sales, vacancies, those sorts of things, because then that helps them determine any programming or do they need to evaluate why certain trends are happening. Also, the other committees will be responsible for some of this information, particularly volunteer hours that are related to their committee work. So what boundary do we use? We use the district boundary, the Main Street boundary. A lot of communities have various boundaries, maybe a community improvement district boundary or a historic preservation boundary, but we want you to use the Main Street district boundary. And we do understand that that may change over time. And if you do make changes to that boundary, please let us know, because there are also other entities we need to be made aware of that boundary change. So where do we find this information? The best place, the best source of this are the eyes on the street. It's the eyes and ears of the Economic Vitality Committee. A lot of times we use indicators such as dumpsters being delivered to buildings or maybe a lift being placed in front of the building. That's a true indication that something's happening there that we need to pay attention to. But also having a good relationship with the business owners and property owners is very, very important. Letting them know why we're collecting this information, that the information is being kept anonymous or confidential, and that they can trust Missouri Main Street and trust the local Main Street program to protect that information. Also, city officials are another good source. There may be building permits that are being issued or different zoning requirement changes that are taking place that the city can alert the Main Street organization and say, hey, something's going to be taking place in this building. Just wanted you to know. But also county, state, and federal officials, particularly if you have facilities in your district related to those entities, having a good relationship with them can be helpful in this reporting process. As I mentioned previously, the other committees, knowing what is being submitted so they can play a role in that, or if they hear or see something. I also think about, the design committee may be responsible for facade grants. If that's the case, that is one of the data points that is collected and submitted, which is public and private investment to buildings. So that can become important. And then, of course, informing your partners of what you're doing and why you're collecting it, they can be a good source of information. So we have some best practices that have been learned over the years of doing this. Your Economic Vitality is the lead, but let's divide and conquer that information. Let's share it amongst the whole committee. So as you see things, or the beginning of every Economic Vitality Committee meeting, having a discussion about what we see out on the street, and then determining who's going to go have the conversation with the property owner or the business owner. Also, keeping a clipboard or a digital file with information that you can just drop stuff into through the quarter, so you have it all in one place for the submission process is a good thing to do. Again, having those conversations, having good partnerships, ensuring that your key partners understand why you're collecting it, what you're going to do with it, and why it's important can be very important into getting them on board. Break it down into manageable parts. Sometimes there are quarters that a lot of things are happening. Just spread that information out, spread out those responsibilities. And then we also recommend printing out the report before you hit the submit button. Sometimes out in cyberspace, things can happen and the report gets lost on its way to us. So having a printout of that can be valuable for you, not only if the data is lost, but also for you to retain that information so you can store it in a way that you can view it over time and look for trends. And then for the hours, volunteer hours being submitted to us, have sign-in sheets everywhere at committee meetings, at board meetings, at events, at project meetups, all those sorts of things, giving folks an opportunity to sign in. But remembering and encouraging that volunteers also include hours outside of that meeting that they're working on Main Street stuff. They may be working on a project or an event and doing that outside of committee time. And sometimes that gets lost. Volunteer hours is probably the most underreported number in the report. So where do we submit that information? We have a platform that we use for submissions. It's called FormStack. You can find that link on our website under the login information. But if you don't have a login, that doesn't mean you can't find the link. It is also in the comment section of this YouTube video is this PDF with all of the written instructions on it, but also at the end of that PDF is the direct link to the submission form. So several ways to find it, or you can always email us at Missouri Main Street to get that. So let's get into the form. So first of all, we just need to collect information about who's submitting this and for what organization and what time frame they're doing that. So this is the first thing you'll see when you open up the form. We want to know your name, your organization, and your email address. This email address is very important because there is a save and come back later feature. And if you do use that, an email is sent to this email address with a link to come back to the partially filled out form. But also if we have questions about the form, we need to know who we should contact. And then which quarter you're submitting for. And then we ask this question, do you have economic data to submit for this quarter? Yes or no? If you say no, but you always have volunteer hours and always have board and committee minutes to submit to us. So there's those two options there. It also opens up other boxes down below based upon your answer. So what are we collecting? So let's get into the bullet points for the items that are part of the submission process, part of the collection and submission. So the first thing is public improvements. And so for each of these, you're going to see we ask particular questions. So in this area, it's what is the project name? Maybe it's a street, maybe it's a building, total cost, and then what are the source of the funds? And projects in this area would include all those things owned or out in the public realm, owned by public entities, city, county, state, and federal. So this would include streets and sidewalks, lighting improvements, public bathrooms, new signage, any construction being done on city, county, but we could also throw in state or federal buildings if you have those in your district, water and sewage, park installations, beautification projects, those sorts of things. So for those projects, like maybe it's a street or they're updating the water lines and things like that, it might be part of a bigger project that goes beyond the Main Street district boundaries. So you would want that entity, whoever's doing the work, to estimate the cost of that project just within the district boundaries. And we understand it's not a perfect science, but just looking for a good estimation on that. Some of the others are very easy, of course, to determine. If you're just putting lights in the downtown district, you know that number and can report that. This is what it looks like on the form. Of course, in each section, we've got the description based upon what I just said. Helps you understand if you don't have the instructions in front of you. What's the project name, the address, the dollar amount for the project, and then also funding for the project. And you can see here it says city, county, community improvement district, state or federal grants. But we also give you that other spot just so if it's an interesting funding mechanism, could be CDBG, and you could put that in there. And then at the bottom, we have, do you have additional public projects to report? If you say no, you're just going to move on to the next section. If you say yes, another section like this will pop up for you then to enter that information. And you're going to find that through the whole report. It's a dynamic report. If you say no, you're just going to move on to the next section. But if you say yes, these boxes are going to open up again for that next project. So now we want to talk about private building improvements. So again, same information, the address, the investment, and funding sources. So for this, it's anything attached to the building, both on the inside or the outside of the building. So this would not be things like if a business is opening up and they're putting display cases and things like that into the building, that doesn't apply. Anything attached to the building. So this would be facades or slipcover removals, awnings, interior rehabilitation and restoration, exterior signage, roof replacement, heating and cooling, windows. Again, those things that are attached to the building. So this is what the report looks like. And you see under the funding for the project, again, we give you some options, but there is that other category that you can utilize. And then again, do you have an additional project to report? Yes or no, depending upon how you answer, determines what is next for you on this form. So then we want to talk about new buildings or additions. And this is both for public and private property. And you'll see when I bring up the form that in the bottom left, that's where you will determine, is it a new building, public building or private building, or is it a new public or private addition? So the building address, the dollars invested, and then do you have any additional things to report there? This one's pretty simple. And when we talk about new buildings, of course, that's, filling up a vacant lot. Somebody's building a new building, or maybe the city's building a new structure of some sort. And then additions would be those things attached to a building that's already there and just expanding the footprint. Unfortunately, we do also want to collect damaged and lost buildings. We want to know the address, the amount of the damage or the loss, the building status. Was it just damaged or was it totally lost? And then what's the cause of that damage or loss? Was it a fire? Was it a tornado? Was it just neglect and had to come down after that? And then again, do you have any others to report? We also want to collect new housing units. So I do want to share that in this section, this is just recording the units that were added in the downtown district. But if this new unit was the result of a new building being built, then you would report that new building being built and the cost of that in the previous section we just went through. Or maybe it's a rehabilitation that would then fall under that private investment dollars that we saw earlier. So for new housing, you're going to record it in two sections. And so this is what that looks like. What's the building address, total number of units that were added, the types of units. Is it owner occupied? Is it rental or is it other? And the other you could potentially put VRBO. I know that is a rental, but here we're thinking about rental in the traditional sense of a monthly rental as opposed to a nightly rental. And then again, do you have any additional housing units to report? Yes or no? Now we want to get into the business side of things. So we want to know about the businesses that were started or relocated to the district. And here we want to know, of course, the business name and the address. And we want to know the number of full-time and part-time employees. But we want you to record those as what's called an FTE, full-time equivalent. So for example, let's say that a new business opened and it has one full-time employee and two part-time employees. That would be a 2 FTE reporting. The full-time employee is 1, and the 2 part-times equal 1 FTE or full-time equivalent. And then Main Street America added in the minority business owner section a few years ago, just to do some additional tracking. And we'll show you that we'd like to have that information, but also maybe you don't know or the owners do not wish to disclose that. And then was this a startup or a relocation? So we want to know if the business moved into the district or from another part of town or another community, or was it a startup new business? And so you can see how all of that reports out here on the actual digital report. And this is that section that I mentioned, majority ownership designation. And there you can check all that apply. It could be multiples, it could be a woman and a veteran-owned business potentially. So on the other side, we want to know about businesses that closed or moved out of the district. A lot of the same information, but in reverse. So we want to know the business name, the business address. Did the business physically close, period, forever? Or did that business move out of the Main Street district into another part of town or another community? And then the number of employees lost, and again, as FTE or full-time equivalents. We also want to know about businesses expanding or reducing in the Main Street district. This one is probably a little harder to keep track of just because you don't see that in the everyday interactions with a business owner. And so this is where that relationship with the business can be very important. But also, we recommend at Missouri Main Street that the EV committee, the Economic Vitality Committee, do annual business visits, checking in with the business every year, asking a certain number of questions. And one of those is, how many employees do you currently have? And so if you're doing this every year, you can then be tracking from year to year. Is this business expanding? Is it reducing, or is it holding steady? So once you do those business visits and notice that there's a difference for that business from one year to the next, then you can record it here in the quarterly report. So this is what it looks like. Again, very similar to what I just said. So next are volunteer hours. And I mentioned this earlier. This is probably the most underreported section of the report. We probably underreport our volunteer hours collectively across the entire network nationwide. But we have three categories that we collect volunteer hours from. The first one being board member hours. And so these are hours that the board members are specifically doing board functions. So give you an example, the board secretary, when they're preparing the agenda or typing up the board minutes, those hours would be recorded in that section. If the board president is out meeting with maybe some city officials about a particular project, those hours would be included also. So just don't think about meeting hours for the board. Think about them out doing board member things also. And then the same thing for committee member hours. Of course, we want to record the committee meeting time, but also when that committee is working on a project, working on an event, those things would go under the committee hours. So recommended that you have a sheet, a sign-in sheet for volunteers, and maybe have a column that they report their committee hours, but then also a column where they're reporting committee work hours. And then the last one is event hours. And so this is the actual day of the event that's taking place. So you have a big festival going on. All the work before the festival starts would fall under committee member hours, but the day of the event, the day of the festival, would fall under event hours. So sign-in sheet as volunteers are checking in is the best way to do that. Or you might use a platform for volunteers to sign up to volunteer for the event. That's also another great way to track that. This is what it looks like on the form. And so you can see, again, if you forget, the description is up above and can help you manage through that. We do have a lot of Main Street programs that are also not only providing that physical sign-in sheet, paper sign-in sheet, but also using like a Google form or something along those lines. So then they can also have a QR code for volunteers to use to sign in. I think that's a great way to also provide another opportunity for recording those hours. But just remember, not everybody is technologically savvy, and so having both options is important. We also want to know about training sessions that you attended. We want to know about those things that are from us here at Missouri Main Street. How many people did you send? But also National Main Street, maybe webinars and things like that. But also anything related to the work that we do. Could be workshops or trainings from the National Trust for Historic Preservation or Missouri Preservation, or maybe something that your local Historic Preservation Commission did in your community. And then also leadership, management, nonprofit related trainings also should be recorded here. We just want to know what other areas you are using as an organization to expand the knowledge and expand the talents of your organization volunteers. And this is what that looks like. I just have on the screen 1 through 4. There are actually 6 boxes, though, for you to record that information. The next thing is board minutes. It is required that you send us board and committee meeting minutes. We'd like to know what's happening in your community, in your organization, when we're not on site. And we actually read through these. We pay attention to things that you say in the board minutes that we might be able to help you with. We may see something that your organization is struggling with, or a potential project that you're working on that we may have other examples that could be helpful to you. So that's why we collect these. We also store them for you digitally, and we have had some Main Street organizations who a file was corrupt or board minutes were lost. We've been able to come back in and provide copies of those to the organization for their archives. Now, our form only allows for 3 sections of uploads, and let me show you that right now. So there's three at the bottom there, three areas to upload your minutes. Of course, this is a quarterly report, so there are 3 months within that quarter. But if you have multiple documents as part of your board packet or to get those board and committee minutes in there and maybe your financials, you're going to need to merge all of that month's documents into one file. And so if you don't have those capabilities or don't do that already, we do provide a link on the screen. Oops, sorry. We do provide a link on the screen to help you do that. Adobe has a free platform that you can merge Word documents, PDFs, Excels, all into one PDF. And so that might be helpful for you to create your board packets anyway. But if you don't already do that, use that link to merge your monthly reports together, and then you could upload then the 3 months worth of activities there. If you have problems or questions about that, please reach out to us. We can help you with that. We also want to know if you have any new board members. We want to update our database, make sure we get them on the newsletter list and those sorts of things. So here's that information. And then we also want to know if you had any change in officers and give us the list of who those officers are. If you click yes, different boxes open up and we want to know who your officers are. Again, those change usually once a year, but that also then gives us the notification to change our database and contacts for your organization. So very important to fill that out and let us know. This is an optional space for the submission. It's the grants applied for and or received. We like to track this. We do a grant resource directory monthly that gives different grant opportunities that might be of interest to our Main Street organizations. And so we'd like to know, are you using that? Did you find this grant through that resource directory? Did you get the grant? And if so, how much did you receive? And then also the last thing in that section is, would you mind sharing your winning application? We do have Main Street programs that are looking at particular grants and may want to see what a winning application looks like. So again, optional. If you don't want to share that information with us, then you don't have to. But we would like to know when you receive grants because we like to ask questions about those sometimes, particularly if it's something that we've never been aware of, that maybe we could share then with the network. And this section is only for the fourth quarter. So when you click that button up above for fourth quarter reporting, this section will open up down below. We only collect this once a year because Main Street America asks us to submit this information for the year. So the two things are average commercial rental rate per square foot and then ground floor commercial vacancy rate. So for average commercial rental rate per square foot, how you collect that is look at any vacancies within your downtown district and what are they renting for per square foot. So you have to do some math and things related to that. If you are very fortunate and have 0% vacancy, then you'll need to talk to 4 or 5 business owners and find out what their rent is per month and to get your average commercial rental rate per square foot number. We like to track that because what we see is that as a Main Street program is being more impactful, those rates go up slightly, sometimes more than slightly. But that's an indicator that it's a healthy market, that rates are going up. Traditionally in Main Street districts, the rates are very low. And so that's an indicator. And then also ground floor commercial vacancy rate. What is the vacancy rate for your district? If you're using Booms Tracker, and if you don't know what that is, reach out to us. If you do know what that is, if you're keeping it up to date, all you have to do is log into that and you can see what your vacancy rate is in your downtown district. But if you're not in Booms Tracker, you just need to look at your entire district to note how many of the spaces are occupied. And this is just ground floor. Both of these are ground floor. Look at how many are occupied and then how many are vacant and figure out what that percent is and submit that to us. So that brings us to the end of the report. I mentioned earlier that there is a save and resume later button, as you can see on the screen. That does allow you to come back and finish later. So let's say you're submitting information and get interrupted. You can click that button, it saves it, and it's going to email a link to you. Remember at the beginning, when you put in your email address, it's going to email a link back to that email address for you to come back and finish filling out the information. Now, I do want to add that do not upload your documents, your board minutes, committee minutes, because in the save and resume feature, they'll be gone when you come back to them. It doesn't hold those documents into the form. When you're ready to submit the form, hit submit. I'm sorry, wait, back up. Print the report really quickly before you hit submit, so you have those records in case something happens. But after you hit submit, the email address you entered up above will receive a PDF version of your report that you can use and file away. But just in case it doesn't, you've got that printout copy. Also want to add one little other caveat with the platform we use, and none of them are perfect. We wish it was. But to navigate through the document, you either need to use Tab or use your mouse to move around. Do not hit enter. If you hit enter, it's going to submit the form, and you're probably not finished with it yet. So just use Tab or your mouse to move around. So what happens if you forget something? And what do? Well, you can do one of two things. One is you can hold the data that you forgot to submit and enter it the next month. We don't typically do a lot with the data from quarter to quarter, but if it's something significant and you want to get it in there and get it into the official record, you can email us and let us know, or you can just submit it the next quarter. Now, the only time we wouldn't want you to submit it in the next quarter is if we're going from one year to the next, because for us, it's important to keep all the things organized by year, because that's how we report out to Main Street America, Department of Economic Development, also our annual report. We want to make sure there's a clean cut between the 2 years. But again, any questions, just reach out to us. So submitting the information, of course, you've been talking about, it's an online platform, but when do we do that? Well, the reports are due April 15th, July 15th, October 15th, and for the fourth quarter, January 15th. So those are the dates. It's the 15th of the month after the quarter ends. So it's always due at those time periods. So I talked about it earlier, but where do you find the link to do that? Under the login tab. If you don't have a login, though, reach out to us, because you should get one, because it also gives you access to our resource library. But if you don't have a login, that doesn't prevent you from filling out the report. The link to the PDF in this YouTube video, there's also a link in that PDF that you can use to submit the form. And as always, you can reach out to us. So good luck in your collection and submission. And always know we're here to help if you do have questions. Good luck.